much. Okay. Hello, and welcome to tonight's Speed Talk event. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Andrea Macaroun, and I'm an executive committee member. Tonight with me are Elsa Lam, our advisory member, as well as Massa Malik and Stephanie Hussein, and Ramona joining us from KPMB. Thank you for being here with us. We have 4 incredible women presenting tonight's talk. We will introduce them later. I would like to begin by taking a moment to acknowledge that the land we are based on is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Gwendot, and it is now the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are honored to have Andrea, Roxane, Samantha, and Sahana from KPMB give the tonight's speed talk. We are a volunteer-run organization made up of architects, designers, leaders, and entrepreneurs, creating opportunities for community building, advocacy, networking, and mentorship. We believe that empowering women in the design community improves and enriches the practice of architecture, the quality of the built environment, and ultimately the human experience. We are committed to creating lasting, systemic, and transformational change. And with purpose-driven action, openness, compassion, and respect for the diverse perspective, this will happen. BEAT is one of the many chapters in Canada, including the Toronto chapter, which is us, the Northern Canada chapter, Atlantic Canada, and the Prairies. Now I will hand it over to Massa to tell you more about our talks.
Beat Talks are small private events that showcase the work of local architecture professionals. The talk qualifies for one OAA structured learning hour. For those attending virtually, please stay until the end of the presentation to get your certificate. And for those joining us in person, we have a sign-up sheet where you can indicate your name and email, and the certificates will be emailed to the participant by the end of January. Please wait until the end to ask any questions. We will have a Q&A session. And there's also an opportunity for networking and enjoying some light refreshments. We are honored to have the women of KPMB present tonight's talk. And I would also like to thank Nina for her help in organizing the event. I'll hand it over to Shirley Blumberg to present our speakers. Thanks.
I'm delighted to welcome everybody to our offices tonight and to introduce 4 impressive architects who are all at different stages of their careers. So in order of appearance, Andrea Macaroun came to Canada from Brazil to do her architectural studies at U of T, where my partner Bruce Kuwabara was her thesis advisor. Naturally, after graduation, she joined us and is a senior associate. She's contributed to a wide range of projects from civic, academic, cultural, and workplace design. She's currently in a leadership role on Agnes Reimagined, the Arts Center at Queen's University. Next to her is Roxane Bejjany, who is an associate and also a U of T graduate. Prior to joining us in 2019, she worked for Shim Sutcliffe Architects. Roxane has worked on a courthouse competition and is currently playing a leadership role in Project Horizon, the master plan for Sick Kids Hospital. Roxane also serves on our student hiring committee and spearheads many of KPMB's community service programs. Samantha Hart, known as Sam to us, started at KPMB as a student in 2014. She's been a valued member on academic projects for Princeton University and Boston University. She's also worked on the design for new interiors for the Bank of Nova Scotia. Sam is currently working on the team designing a new building for the Yale Dramatic Arts. Sahana Dharmaraj graduated from the McKenna School of Architecture. She joined us in 2018 when she was still a student as well. And she played a pivotal role in coordinating the design competition we won for a new research and discovery center for CAMH. When she returned after graduation, she worked on 2 other successful competitions, including the Downsview Framework Plan. I think that's all just a coincidence. I don't think you are a lucky charm. Sahana was an inaugural member of our EDI committee. In her spare time, she's a film and video producer and a volunteer with the Toronto Society of Architects. So, Andrea, I guess you're going to start.
Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. It's humbling to tell my personal story. It's personal. You have to go back a couple of years. So I'm going to do that with you. Oops. Okay, bear with me. No? Okay, sorry. So at this point in my life, I have lived half of my life in South America and half of my life in North America. And I had to go back where I came from, which is this beautiful town inland in Brazil, surrounded by mountains. It's a planned grid city. And this is the square that I rode out to ride a bike, and I would go on Sundays. And there's a lot of government buildings. And one building always stood out, even when you're a kid, focus on your bike, because the curves are just so beautiful. And it's an Oscar Niemeyer building in this very different context. So I was lucky enough to grow up in a town that had his first commission to do these beautiful 5 buildings. And these beautiful curves, I guess, shaped me in a sense. And I went to architecture school in Brazil. I started my studies in 1996 in this architecture school. This is the lobby. My grandfather was a Lebanese immigrant, and he actually did the handrails for this stair. He was a metal worker, and he worked in a few of Niemeyer buildings in my hometown, Belo, and in São Paulo. So I wanted to talk about him a little bit too. My first trip with the school was to São Paulo to see the Museum of Art by Lina Bobardi. And this building is downtown. She lifted the whole thing, her force, which was in my mind, it kind of is like that, to make space for people. Her passion was, she was an immigrant from Italy, but she really loved to build things for the community. This still such a busy spot, protests, market, art exhibits, and this kind of really impressed me. There's an image of her that I love, which is under construction. And this is the time that the field was completely dominated by male figures. But she designed this glass easel. And the glass easel is for the museum with no walls, which I love that idea, because usually when I put a painting on the wall, but the glass easels, you see the painting from all around and is accessible and close to you. It's a radical proposition, and that will come back later. But those are the things that kind of marked my beginnings of interest in architecture. In 1997, I came with a friend to Toronto, and I had time, and I wanted to visit a couple of offices and schools. And I called KPMB, and Robert Hill gave me a tour of the office. I fell in love with the loft, and I could feel the importance of the work. I asked him at the end of the tour, how can I work here? And he told me I needed to go to a good school. And one of the schools was U of T. So at the end of the trip, I grabbed the package and I went back home and I filled it up. And I said, who knows if I'll get this? But I was accepted. And I moved to Toronto in 1998 for my Bachelor of Architecture, which I completed in 2002. But obviously before that, I called Bruce and I wanted him to be my mentor. And he said, come over. And I came and I showed my portfolio. And he said, okay, you can be my student. And I had two other friends that I brought along. One of them still with KPMB until today. So I joined KPMB after in 2002. This is the timeline. And I didn't want to do a straight line because it goes ups and downs, just like life, architecture. But I worked in many projects and it's been an amazing, like we have so much talent, we have so much knowledge, and to be part of this team is amazing. I do have to say I left for 1 year, but I missed KPMB and I came back and I'm happy to be back. I love this photo. I want to talk about the celebration of the 30-year anniversary at the KPMB party in the old loft. And I'm going to read this one, hold on. So I love this photo of the 3 founding partners celebrating the 30th year anniversary of the firm. I've learned so much from the 3 of you. You are brilliant. Thank you for creating a practice that produces work that is so meaningful and purposeful. Thank you for lighting a young generation of partners to continue this legacy. It's so exciting to be here. So I have many projects, but I want the milestones for me, in this case, I only have 10 minutes. Sahana Studio. And Glenn, it was a mentor, a collaborator. Glenn is a knowledge and a delightful person to work with. And we were tasked with a modest budget to design a facade that had a message for the client, which was evolve or die, which I love. And so we figured out all the details together, and the building is on Istra, and we did it. So thank you, Glenn. This was a really good one. I up to that point, I had done a lot of interiors, so I really needed to do a building. And thank you, Shirley. Another project was with Paulo Rocha, is a corporate interiors. And this project, I mean, Paulo is an amazing talented. He's a mentor. He believed in me, and we worked together and collaborated and figured out a lot of very refined details. I think I learned a lot, and this was a moment in time that we took it to another level, and it was really special. So thank you, Paulo. Which brings me to now, which Agnes Reimagine. This is an amazing team. I'm so lucky to be in this team. We are all collaborating, client, project managers, Queen's University, like everyone is working together with the community, which I love. And there's this amazing piece in this on site, which is Agnes Adlerton House, which she donated to Queen's to further the cause of art and community. So it's a great start. This is Emily, the director and curator of the gallery, and she's a force. And being beside her is just so amazing because she's going up and she's bringing everyone with her. And really, she's so committed to decolonization, truth and reconciliation, and to changing museum practice. So I'm very lucky to have her as a client. These are some of the things that she's doing, and every time I go to site, I kind of see one of them, and we actually saw the band on the left from Indonesia playing with the elders, and they were there for a week. And she is radical. She got graffiti all over one of the existing buildings on site, the one on the right, which in the context of Queens and the limestone, it's pretty amazing. And then we got Georgina Riel. She's the Indigenous Affairs consultant, and she's just opening our eyes to, well, the way she talks about home is a home for one person might not necessarily be a home to another, which is very nice to think like that. There's one thing, she also talked to us about our first home being the womb, which is such a beautiful thought. So she's in our team, and it's amazing. And she's been leading all the engagement sessions. We had 3 so far. We stopped for about a year, but we're going to continue, and you're invited to participate. They're hybrid events. July 15th is the next one, and we plan to keep going to really listen from the community and kind of bring and refine the design to make sure we are listening and making it through. So this is the concept rendering that we showed to the public in last year. And I think it really materializes the idea of the side-by-side Western and Indigenous worldviews sitting side by side, which is the colonial house and the curvilinear volumes to the left. And the idea of the house being alive again is very important to Emily, and we love it. There's a cafe on the ground floor, community rooms also on the ground floor. There's an artist in residence, so it's really a home again on the second floor. There's an event space on the ground floor on the curvilinear shape. The second floor is the self-determination space, the Indigenous self-determination spaces. It's like the space doesn't exist in Canada, so we're really trying to figure out what it needs to really do what it needs to do for the Indigenous community and, you know, the ancestors. That's what they call their art objects, how to keep them safe and alive, which is a completely different concept from Class A space and art galleries. So it's amazing. And then the third floor is the lab and teaching and research labs for art conservation. This is, we call it the living room, it's the lobby. Emily calls it the living room for the living museum, where all activities are entangled and people are kind of moving in a fluid space. And this is, you know, just after engagement, getting to the shapes. I wanted to talk about, you know, I'm going back to where I was comfortable with the curves, and it's almost like a full loop, like I'm going back into my childhood, which is really nice to, you know, after you learn so much, to kind of go back at that time. And, but not only the curves, I'm going back to, you know, what guided Lena on her design, really committed to social work. And informing the design. So I'm going to read one more thing because I kind of want to get this right. I'm very honored at this moment to mentor a few young architects. I listen and learn from them as much as I try to give them advice. What I always try to do in life and in my profession is to instill passion and authenticity into them. We all have amazing stories and memories that can contribute for a polyvocal design process. Architecture is not easy, but you have to pursue your values. And as women, we have to ask for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, I'm Roxane Bejjany. And when I was asked to speak about my journey, the first thing that came to mind for me was the mentorship I had along the way at specific moments in my career that were pivotal for me. And so I thought I would speak about those moments in particular. After graduating from architecture school, I worked for 7 years at Sutcliffe when I was a student. Before I was a student, then I became a student, and a few years afterwards. Then I got some experience at Eisen Architecture, and I've been at KPMB for 4 years. But what I'm going to talk about is specific moments in my careers, starting with when I was a student, then when I was an intern or a junior architect, and then ending with where I am now. So I'm going to start with a quote by Michelle Obama, because I recently watched her interview with Oprah and it was really good. So it was top of mind. And she talked about a lot of things that have to do with mentorship and creating your own table. And the takeaway for me from this quote is the word intentions. It's the intentionality of building your table and your community and your support system, and tending to it. So the thing that resonates for me is not just that, but it's also having natural mentors, people that really care about what they do, but they also care about you and your growth. But it's equally important that you are somewhere where you feel supported and you feel like you've got that table. It's your table and you're gathering people around your own table, even when you're a junior or a young architect. So when I started at Shimsutcliffe, I was like maybe 20 years old. I had just finished my undergrad. I wanted to do architecture school. I wanted to kind of figure it out. I had done mathematics and linguistics. I was good at a lot of things. Architecture at that point was not one of them. I worked at the mall. I sold shoes, and it was part-time. I wasn't getting enough hours. And I went to one of the TSA events, and someone was like, "There's this lady. Her name is Bridget. She needs help for a couple of weeks to clean the office." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." So I went, and she gave me a tour, and there were models everywhere with like an inch of dust on all of them. Some were new, some were old. Sketches absolutely on every single surface. Some were scribbles, some were fully developed drawings. I didn't know what they were, but they looked like scribbles to me. Trinkets on every shelf, full one-to-one mock-ups. And I thought, how am I going to clean all this? Not realizing that that's not actually what I was going to be doing. So the projects you're seeing here are not projects that I actually worked on. What I did work on is what I call the afterlife of the projects, which is really when the project's life actually begins. So in an office, as soon as a project's complete, the team moves on, they leave everything in a pile, they dump it in a box, they go on to their next project. But in real life, this is when the life of the project actually begins. And what I was working on is, organizing thousands and thousands of sketches, and I had to figure out what they were, and I had to sort through them, and then I had to sort them chronologically. Scribbles. And then I had to know, like, this scribble was for this project, but this scribble is that project for sure. And God forbid I got them wrong. And once they were in chronological order, I had to scan them, make them into a booklet, and every project had like 4 of these booklets. And it took months and months. It wasn't 2 weeks. I stayed longer than the 2 weeks, by the way. It took a really long time, but those got archived with the Canadian Centre of Architecture. There was a whole process that was involved. And so my cleaning project became an archival project. And then the next project was putting together and working with the contractor to put together a maintenance manual for this project called the Integral House. And I had to learn what specs were. I had to contact companies and get spec sheets, and it ended up being like 6 binders. And again, 6 months later, we had all these binders. And so these cleaning tasks that I thought was just organizing an office actually turned out to be really important architectural projects that really shaped me and created a framework of architecture for me that I didn't realize I was getting. And so through immense mentorship from Bridget Shim and others at the office, I somehow evolved and became immersed in this fantasy world of architecture where everything was possible. I witnessed the commitment to experimentation within the office, a respect for material, for time, an innate connection with us, nature, and architecture. And it was working on, even though I didn't work on these projects, I actually almost saw them from beginning to end through these organizational projects that I had in the office. And so I knew the steps that it took, the thought process, all the kind of background information, and then the photography and the award submissions and the publications and the kind of these jobs sort of evolved over time. And so even though no one in the office wanted to touch it because they were done, this project's over, they spent 7 years on it, in a few months, it was telling the story of the project. And the rigor that was put into telling the story of a project is I learned that it was so important. And the amount of time spent at that particular firm on doing that, on telling the story of a project, the narrative, and keeping it alive is really, really critical. But I also learned through observation and through mentorship that how to be an architect that really, really cares. You have to care about everything. You care about every detail, every material, every scribble. And the more you care and the more you put into a project, the better it turns out. I then moved on. So after those initial projects, I decided to go to architecture school. I continued to work part-time. I graduated. I got my internship hours. I became an intern architect and was able to write my exams. And I moved on to working on other things. But for me, that was a really pivotal moment. It was those projects
that really clicked for me. And so then I went on to work at Eisen Architecture very briefly. It's a small firm doing custom residential homes. And anyone who's worked at a small firm understands this. You have 3, 4, 5, 6 projects on the go. You see them from beginning to end. They're a few years long, but within architecture, that's really fast. So you really get to see every aspect of the project and have that experience. And for me, at that point in my career, I needed that because it gave me the confidence that I needed to leverage all this knowledge and experience that I had and put it towards something that was my own, and it was my own projects. So working closely with Brenda, who runs an all-female firm, it was a really great experience for me to gain that confidence that propelled me to the next step, which was KPMB. So once I got to KPMB, at this point I had worked on projects after they were done and then through the design and construction. But once I got here, it's almost like I was working backwards. I started with competitions. I had never done competitions before. So I worked on the Halton Courthouse competition for 6 months and then went on to the UTM Arts, Culture and Technology building. We were awarded that project, worked on it on SD through DD, and then I switched to SickKids at that point. So SickKids is led by Mitch Hall, who's one of the partners. And along the way, I've got the images of the partners that were on the projects because they're really, really critical. Each one of them was a mentor and each one of them believed in me and really advocated for me as an architect. And that really makes all the difference when you're on a project. And so once I was on SickKids, SickKids is led by Mitch Hall, who's sitting in the back there, listening to what I'm gonna say. Can you even hear me? You can't hear me. Okay. But SickKids has become a really, really important project for me. It's the one on the top right and the images right below it. Those are some renderings we created for the SickKids Foundation. The project is in its infancy stages. It's not even in SD yet, but it's such a huge project. It's like a 30-year project. We're 5 years in, there's a long way to go. But it's given me the opportunity to take the lead on to take leadership on the project. And it has a lot to do with Mitch as a leader, who has given not just myself, but anyone who's on the project has been able to really become what they want to become on the project. Which is really refreshing and nice to see. But SickKids is one of the most important children's hospitals in the world. People move to Canada to live near SickKids so that their kids can get the best care. Some patients are born at SickKids and they stay there their whole lives. Others just never leave. They celebrate milestones, birthdays, prom, because don't forget, children is up to the age of 18. So it's a really special place, but it's an important place. And there's a lot of amazing people who work there who care a lot about what they do. And we see that through a lot of our meetings, our workshops, as we get to know our clients. It's pretty incredible. The project is a joint venture with Stantec Architects. And so there's been a lot of collaboration with them and the team. And this is what it looks like now. So we have a long way to go. If anyone's been in a hospital, you know that they're usually not nice. You kind of go there and you feel sicker than you did before you even entered. And you want to get out of there as quickly as possible. And we want to change that, not because we want you to stay longer, but we want you to leave as quickly as possible because you're better, not because you can't wait to get out of there. Mitch is going to be really happy about the slide. This image is of Bridgepoint, a project I did not work on, but Mitch did. And after the project, there was a POE, which is a post-occupancy evaluation done by a researcher who looked strictly at the architecture of the building and determined many things, one of which that the architecture alone improved people's outcomes by 30%. So the fact that the architecture can do this is a really big deal. Because in healthcare, we never get to see that. And one of the important One of the great things about Stick Kids is the vision that they have for the project. It's a concept called precision child health, and it stems from precision medicine. It's a little bit more specific, but it essentially is the ability to read your genomic profile and understand your environment in order to predict, prevent, diagnose, and treat disease in a way that's tailored to you. So rather than a generic approach or a generic treatment to everybody, you know, everyone gets a Tylenol, that's not it. Depending on your history, your genetics, your blood type, your family history, your postal code, where you grew up, your socioeconomic background, they take all of that data to tailor treatment to you. And that's really revolutionary. And I think it's done in other hospitals around the world, but this is something that's really important for them here. But what we did learn is that what comprises precision child health is the genetics and the clinical data, but actually it's also your environment and your lifestyle, where you grew up, where you live. And that's huge for us, because now there is research that's telling us, coming from the clinicians and from the hospital, telling us in order to be better, that's got to be better. And so we get to actually use that to leverage design and architecture. And it's not that architecture is going to support precision child health. The architecture is actually half the battle. And if you don't have good design, if spaces are not making you healthier, you will not achieve your vision. So this is the rendering again of what the campus is going to look like. And the identity of the hospital will be that the building is a beacon of well-being. Spaces need to promote health and well-being. And questions we ask ourselves: how do we deinstitutionalize the institution? How do we instill confidence? How do you provide comfort and trust? How do people feel better? How do you reduce stress? All of these aspects that we already know as architects and would love to, you know, we design by, we now, it's now embedded in part of the vision. And so with that, I leave us with my favorite quote. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. And this kind of ties the various aspects together, whether it's our clients who provide care, whether it's mentors who have shown a lot of care, whether it's architects who care a lot. At the end of the day, it's important to care and being intentional about surrounding yourself by people who care, being somebody who cares, and really taking that on as your own, as part of your own growth to propel you, to kind of leverage your experience and propel yourself from one stage to the next in your career. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, it's an honor to be here, to be speaking in front of you. Truly it is. So I'm Sam. And I wanted to start with kind of framing who I am and what my brand is with this slide. As I speak, you can speculate which one is me. Can thank my mom for the bowl-like shape haircut. And also for finding this picture. She had to look all over the house to find this. So I have been playing sports my whole life. As soon as I could walk, I was running. Soccer has been a huge part of my life. I come from a bigger family. There's four of us, so I have 3 other siblings. We're all very active. We grew up in a small town, which at the time was 1,500 people. It's now closer to 5,000. Ayr, Ontario, if you're ever by Kitchener-Waterloo, that's where I'm from. So small town. But soccer has been incredibly important for me, not just as a kid, but growing up now as a professional. The transferable skills that I gained while playing sports, things like teamwork, commitment, self-motivation, mental toughness, goal orientation, were all really important. What I think now is probably the most important skill that I have learned is how to fail. When you play sports, you fail 50% of the time, unless you're a really good team. And I don't know if this looks like a really good team to you, but you learn how to fail, and you get used to being afraid, and you get used to, you know, fearing things and hitting it head on, irregardless. So the next slide I want to speak to is a frog. And this goes back to high school, where I was your quintessential lazy teenager who slept in and procrastinated and, you know, ate dinner at 10 p.m. and didn't want to do anything. And then I took a leadership course in grade 11.
And there was a book that really resonated with me, and it was called Eat Your Frog, 21 Ways to Stop Procrastinating and Get More Done in Less Time. And the story here is essentially, if you have a task in a day that's really challenging or daunting, perhaps this, speaking in front of all of you, to let that be the first thing you do in that day. Had I had my way, we would have done this at 7 a.m., but that's okay. I don't think you all would be available. But the point is that if something is daunting and you're dreading doing it, if you do it first thing in the morning, that will motivate you throughout the day, and you'll be your better self throughout the day. You'll be motivated, and you know, it's a self-esteem thing too. I've conquered that, and you'll carry that with you throughout the day, and you'll be a better version of yourself. So this book also goes back to a Mark Twain quote, which is essentially that if it's your job to eat a frog, do that first thing in the morning. If unfortunately you have to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest one first. Okay, so now I just want to go to my experience at KPMB. So when I graduated from my undergrad, I actually got the courage I went and saw Bruce speak at the National Gallery in Ottawa, and I was just enthralled. I loved listening to him. He's well-spoken. The portfolio of work was amazing. And I got the courage to just one day say, I'll just email him and just tell him I was so, you know, I loved listening to you. I was inspired. And then also I'm a student, and are you looking to hire students for this? And I was amazed he responded really quickly, actually, like within hours. And so then my journey at KPMB began. And this is probably the most paramount aspect of my journey. Was my first project that I worked on at KPMB was in the CA phase. So it was already under construction. And this was the Princeton University project at 20 Washington. And it was a heritage restoration project. And I was just so lucky to get the experience to go to site, which was just totally invaluable as a student. So my initial experience in the profession actually was on the construction site. And I think that's really shaped who I am to learn, you know, you can design one thing in an office, but then when you go to site, especially with a heritage restoration building, it's not going to work out the way you expect it to. So to have that experience as a student was totally invaluable. So I worked on this project for 2 years, and again, was able to travel to site. And it was just, it's still most paramount in my journey. And then Roxane was speaking about mentors and mentorship. And for me, the most important aspect of this project was the mentors and the guidance that I had on the project. This is David Jessen. We're heading to Penn Station and we're in a hurry. He's running ahead and like, hurry up guys, why are you so slow? And he's just incredibly dedicated to his work. What I really admired about him was that the dedication was there, an incredibly hard worker, smart, brilliant, friendly, and above all that, he was human. You could relate to him, and he was just a wonderful person to be around. So being able to walk that line and strike that balance between being such a hard worker and dedicated to your work, but not being defined by work, was what I really admired about him. Okay, so then I went away to school after my experience on Princeton. I went away to do my master's, and instead of going to Carleton, which is where I did my undergrad, or U of T, which is here where I'm from, I decided to expand my horizons and go out to Vancouver and study at UBC, which really was about broadening my horizons and meeting a new pool of people and networking. Not to mention the snowboarding's amazing and I snowboard, so but we won't go into my snowboarding story here at KPMB. So while I was out at UBC, one of the first studios that we were introduced to, you could pick your studio, and there was a studio there that was AI, AR, RR, all types of augmented reality, and I thought it was so cool, but I had no idea what they were talking about. Like I was like glazed over, had no idea what was going on, but because of that, I decided to take it. So that's kind of, you know, I'm eating my frog in my master's and totally afraid of this. It's like totally foreign to me. I have no idea what it is. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to choose to learn about because I didn't know anything about it. So this is just an example of one of my studio projects. Is totally crazy. I couldn't explain it to you now if I tried, but the point is that if something scares you and intimidates you, you should go and do that thing. So back to mentorship at KPMB, when I finished my master's, or right about when I was about to do my thesis, I actually received a text from David, who was on the Princeton project, and he must have been counting down the days to when I was going to present my thesis. He knew exactly when to text me, and he said, "Hey, you must be done school soon. Where are you going? What are you doing?" And so I came back to KPMB. Obviously, the work is amazing, but him reaching out really is what this firm to me represents, is the people here that, for him to reach out and to bring me back is a large part of why I'm here. So then when I came back, I had a great opportunity to work on Boston University. I think Lucy's here somewhere. There she is, with Lucy and Paulo as well, who Andrea mentioned earlier. So this is a Center for Computing and Data Sciences. And for me, this project was a wonderful opportunity to begin to dive into details, because I had worked on the CA, I'd been on construction, I hadn't really drawn a lot here at KPMB. So this was really the first project where I could start to dive into detailing. And I was able to focus on spaces and just dive fully into it and detail the whole thing and figure out how everything went together. For me, this space that I dove into arguably the most was the Hariri event space, which is right at the top. And it's just a wonderful space. And actually about a month ago, I went to go see it, and it's just kind of like surreal. It's like the most rewarding thing when you draw something and you're so deep into the details, and then you go and see the space and your jaw just kind of drops. It's really rewarding. So for me, this project was important and pivotal because of the detailing, and because I was on the project from SD all the way to the construction set. So I got really a lot of experience in drafting and drawing. The next project I worked on was for the Scotiabank North project, and it was primarily interiors. And this was just a total 180 from the experience on Boston, because this project really was about management and about communication, not just externally to the office, but internally. This project happened during COVID. So we are all siloed in our homes, and this project had an incredibly complex structure. It was one project that was then broken into multiple projects with multiple contractors and multiple project timelines, but all had to be one design and with one kind of design strategy. So you can imagine how that would happen. One project goes out for tender, then you change a detail, and then you've got to kind of track it through all the different timelines of the project. So for me, this was really pivotal for management. Management skills. The next project, which I'm on now, this is a photo of the site, Yale University. It's very early days, so I don't have anything to show you today, but this is the site. And for me, this goes back to doing what you're afraid of. This is my first theater project at KPMB. Going into this project, stage left, stage right, rigging, gridiron, all these terms are being thrown at me really fast that I really didn't have any experience in. So I'm very fortunate that KPMB has an environment where they invest in you, like Roxane was mentioning. I feel invested in. They give you an opportunity to expand your knowledge and to learn. So for me, that's what this project is. This is just an image of a rigging gallery at Yale, their current setup. So this is the kind of like technicality of what we're going to be getting into. I just wanted to end with this slide, just to come back to the idea that everything I do now really stems from my childhood and from the transferable skills that I learned as an athlete. That meant that toughness and that mentality, the fear and failure is still really important. If I'm feeling frustrated, even now in my profession, the first thing I want to do is go play a sport, because for me, that's an outlet, and that helps me cope with all the stress. And goal orientation, I make a to-do list every week. It forever grows, sometimes shrinks, but I think that's really important too, for me to mentally organize all my tasks to do in the day. And then obviously there's much more room for me to grow and learn. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sahana Dharmaraj. I'm an intern architect here at KPMB. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Tamil Canadian, and I was born and raised in Toronto. And so being Tamil Canadian, I grew up with a really big family that was very loving, but also very boisterous. And so from a very early age, I became very comfortable with meeting new people because there was always new aunties or uncles or cousins to meet. And all of our parties involved a lot of talking and eating and dancing, but mostly talking. And so I was also made to sing sometimes at some of these events. So all of these things meant that from a very early age, I became comfortable with public speaking. But my problem is that I tend to talk a little bit too much. So I'm going to try to keep it on time today. And so some other fun facts are that I really love graphic design. I actually worked at an amazing web and design agency called Studio 123 for my co-op for one of my years in university. And another fun fact is that I became an auntie recently to my beautiful nephew named Malcolm. If you ever ask me, I have hundreds of photos that I would show to you. Something that's not so recent, but it feels recent, is that I graduated from the McKenna School of Architecture in 2017 for my bachelor's and in 2019 for my master's degree. So this is a picture from my one of my thesis presentations, and I really like this because it was of all of the things that I was referencing for my thesis itself, but I think that I've carried forth like a lot of the lessons from these texts to today. One of the first things that I did at the beginning of the thesis was write down all of the projects that I had done up until that point and try to figure out or distill what the main message that I was trying to convey with all of the projects I had done. And it helped me identify the thread, which I eventually used for my thesis topic. And that was about communication and community. So it was just a really good way of me to be able to say, throughout all of the things that I've been doing, it always comes down to these things. So I'll elaborate a little bit more on this as I take you through my very modest career so far. I went to the McKenna School of Architecture in Sudbury, Ontario, which for me was a very big departure from home. It was difficult at first, but it wasn't long until I started to appreciate the charm of that place. The beautiful scenery, the lakes, the stars, and most of all, the community I connected with while I was there. This photo on the top left is very sentimental to me because it was taken at the end of our master's degree, but it was a recreation of a photo that we took at the very beginning of our program as the charter class at the Market Building on Elm and Elgin. And it was this beautiful before and after moment. And Marianne asked me the other day, people will probably want to know why I decided to go there. At the time I was applying for architecture school, it wasn't even on my radar because it was a brand new program and they hadn't even had one class of student yet. My family and I took the long drive up the 400 to Sudbury in the summer of 2013. And that's where I met with Terrence Galvin. He spoke about the new curriculum, the building that was going to be in the works, and the professors that would be teaching there. He framed it as an opportunity to be trailblazers, and that's exactly what we became. Being so isolated up there with no one's work to look up to, it felt like we were starting with a completely blank page every time we started a new project. So this is a picture of me at my desk. You can see, I like to point out the fresh sleeve of Boost that's on the left there. It's a meal supplement drink, and it really is what got me through all those late nights. I took the leap of faith to go there because of how all of the professors spoke about the curriculum and how it would be different from the other schools of architecture at the time. And it was. The courses we took were about cultural sustainability, about creating well-tempered environments, about designing for climate change, and about Indigenous identity and architecture and more. The photo that I just showed you was actually in the new building, which is designed by LGA, but we didn't have the new building until my 4th year. So we were using the Market Building that you saw in the other picture and a nearby retirement home. We were hand drawing almost everything for the first few years, building models with no laser cutters or fancy tools. And we learned a lot about craft. We also had plenty of design build projects that taught us how materials came together. And most of our projects always came down to community. We were working on projects with communities across Northern Ontario and met with residents and stakeholders in places like Sault Ste. Marie, Chapleau, and Powassan. Their input almost always informed our designs. We also worked on projects and installations like the one that's on the far right there with the local community or for the local community in Sudbury, and this engaged them in architecture in new ways. During my master's degree, we had an 8-month co-op and I spent it at KPMB. During those months, I worked on a few projects, but the two major ones were 2 competitions. One was for Pier 8, which is a mixed-use development in Hamilton, and the second was for the CAMH Brain Science Research Building here in Toronto. In a way, because of the high stakes and fast-paced environment of these 2 projects, it didn't really feel that dissimilar to school, but it was certainly more intimidating. But I learned a lot. With Pier 8, I found out that I'm good at organization and communication. In addition to working on design iterations for some of the buildings, I took on a lot of the correspondence between the team. We had an especially large team for Pier 8 made up of multiple other architects and design voices. We worked with GH3, Super Cool, and Omar Gandhi's office. You can see Stephanie in this image on the left here. She's my OAA mentor as well, so a little shout out. One of my main takeaways from working on this project was the importance of the ability to anticipate, to be able to take the initiative to suggest what I could work on after I'd completed a certain task, or to foresee obstacles that would arise and plan for them before they occurred. The next competition I worked on was CAMH. It was also high stakes and fast paced, and also a competition at this stage. From this one, I learned a lot more about client relationships, and I learned what it feels like to work on something where everyone really believes in the project and is really passionate about it. The building that we designed is going to be a new home that embodies CAMH's statement, which is mental health is health. We ended up being the successful proponents for both of these competitions. It's obviously a good feeling to win, but there were many other valuable lessons that I was taking with me back to McEwen for my final year. Like I said earlier, it felt like my thesis was a culmination of that thread that I had talked about, which is about community and engagement. And the thesis ended up being all about architecture centers. So I was asking that if you cited an architecture center in a place that was about to experience rapid growth, would you be able to influence the design of the built environment because the community would be engaged and have a say in what was going to happen there? So 2 of my favorite examples of this are the info box in Berlin at Potsdamer Platz. It became a symbol of reunification of the city post-war. It was a temporary architecture center that hosted exhibitions and events to inform the residents on the development that was slated for the area. And not so related to architecture, but the Center for Urban Pedagogy in New York uses graphic design to visualize complex processes and policies in the city so anybody can understand them. After graduating, I rejoined KPMB as a freshly minted intern architect in August 2019, cutting to my next project, which is the Downsview Framework Plan, which ended up being sort of the perfect project post-thesis, and it was really serendipitous. The Downsview Framework Plan had us envisioning up to 520 acres of new community or city on a former airfield, and envisioning a complete, connected, nature-filled community. I won't go into too much more depth into Downsview. It's an amazing project. I encourage you to read about it at ig8downsview.ca. Downsview had a huge public engagement component. It was going to be essentially building a city from scratch. So we really made sure to ask the community what they wanted to see there. And it was essentially the same question that I had asked in my thesis, but it was very humbling to be part of the community engagement process in reality, because it's not as easy. There are a lot of challenges with community engagement. It was made a little bit harder because we actually did a lot of it in the pandemic. So that's what you see there is a screenshot from one of those Zoom presentations that happened. But there were some in-person pop-ups as well. I learned how much the community appreciated us genuinely asking them what they wanted to see there and going to them without a design and asking them for their stories and their needs and what their hardships were. That's what made all the difference. Here is an example of one of the in-person events, which was Play on the Runway. And you can see me there, I'm a very tiny figure on that very large runway on the left. And eventually we did show them renderings, and we dreamed up a place that would be livable and bikeable and walkable. And in the end, it was all about community. What I learned from working on Downsview is that my voice matters and that it was valued. Even though I was one of the youngest team members, it felt like I was empowered to contribute in meaningful ways and that I could speak up and be heard. My next project is for Harbourfront Centre, and this is really going from macro to micro scale. The Harbourfront Centre is an incredible nonprofit cultural organization on Toronto's waterfront. Some of their buildings needed some attention, so here are all the very detailed notes that we took and They're all about the spaces that need accessibility upgrades or usability upgrades. So I had gone from a project that was looking at roads and parks and blocks to looking at door hardware and millwork details and floor finishes. But it was a great way to see a whole project through in a very expedited way. These are the renderings of the lobby and the washroom spaces, and then all the way to the photos of the construction of those spaces. It's also very humbling to learn that what you draw is not necessarily always what gets built, and what the process is to eventually make sure that it does look like what you drew. I also wanted to touch very quickly on my volunteer work and how the thread of communication and community and equity and democratization really comes through in the work that I love doing outside of the office. I worked with Tyler Lowen on TSA's K-12 task force, dreaming up ways that how to get young people more interested in architecture at a younger age. I also helped with KPMB's Doors Open, which was just a few weekends ago, and helped set up the kids table that you see on the left, and it asked children to dream up what their future city would look like. And then on the right, there is an internal KPMB initiative that I did with Nelly Jalal-Zadeh, and we worked together to dream up new modes of play in the city of Toronto. I've also spent time speaking with students and recent grads about their future careers and what they should expect from architecture. And in all of these experiences have really been enriching, in turn, my own career, and they're always teaching me new things. So just to recap some of the things that I mentioned about what I've learned as anticipation, what it feels like to work with people that really care about what they're doing and that my voice matters and that it's valued. But the things that I'm still learning or working on is how to say no and time management and balance. And that I don't always have to be, a perfectionist, that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to make mistakes. And I'm still figuring out what my design voice is and what my design style is, and that's okay. It's okay to still be figuring that stuff out. And I just want to end, talking about mentorship. Most importantly, I'm continuing to learn the value of mentorship, and especially women mentorship. Also a quick shout out about the championship from men like Kevin and Lawrence, who are constantly lifting me up and putting me forth for new opportunities. This is Lawrence and I presenting at the World Architecture Festival in December of last year for the Downsview project. I've been so lucky to have such amazing women mentors throughout my career, starting with professors at MSOA like Tammy Gaber, to so many people here at KPMB like Amanda, who's taught me so much about communication, and Olga, who has been such a role model to me for the past 2 years. Marianne took this picture of us just this Monday in a hotel room in New York of Olga and I. We were prepping for an interview for a pursuit, but there wasn't much space, so you can see we're sitting at an ironing board. Being at this interview and being invited to speak at this interview marks another milestone in my career, and it could not have been possible without our astounding women-led team and the energy that they gave me and their mentorship. It really does always come down to community. So thank you to all my wonderful colleagues who presented today, and thanks to everyone who joined here and on Zoom for listening to our stories.
Hi, I'm Elsa Lamb, and it's my privilege to open question period. So I'll launch off with some questions, but I really wanted this session to focus on questions from the room and also the virtual room too. And I'll let you maybe monitor the virtual questions. Okay. Yeah, next. Okay. There, great. Yes. Sponsors are so important. Yeah. Thank you, all of our sponsors. Super. It makes things happen. And it's also all about relationships in the end, which is what I'm learning at this stage in my career, So think about your questions. I'm going to ask for them in a second. I'll start with you, Andrea, to kind of circle back to the beginning. Yeah. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, I think that for women of different generations, we've been in different places. We've been both like fortunate or unfortunate to have women role models or not. And I was really inspired by you talking about Lena Bobardi a bit. Yeah. I wonder if you could say a few more words about her and how her work inspired you for those people in the room who may not be as familiar with her work.
Yeah, of course.
Do you want to come? Should you come here for the mic?
Yeah, just so
Okay.
I can have you in the-
For the hybrid session and the, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, Lena was, she's finally getting some recognition, but she was working at a time that all the male were dominating the field. But she was really interested in vernacular architecture, how things were put together in a much simpler way, not as sophisticated. And that really kind of, the work is very grounded. And I think, but you see the force of that building in Sao Paulo. It's like, I feel like she's carrying it, and it was really hard. I met someone who met her. There was a picture of her once in the zine, and all the other architects, female at the time, were very serious, and she was smiling. And I was like, I hope she was happy because I love her work so much. But he said she was very tough. And I think you had to be very tough. And now I know you have to be tough. And I see truly how tough she is. So I think she opened the ground to a lot of people, and maybe she didn't get the recognition that she needed. But I'm so happy that, you know, people now look up to her. And I am planning a trip that hopefully Bruce will go see her work with Emily, because it's so powerful. And humbling at the same time, right? Because it started from people, and so I found that so inspiring. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I know it was hard for her. Thank you.
No, that's great. And
Yeah.
I had the privilege to interview Emily for a story, and she's like amazing. So I'm putting July 15th on my calendar for that engagement session, because I'm really interested in how Agnes Reimagined is going to shape up. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so Roxane, I am curious, you talked about working at IZ and working here and kind of working at Shim Sutcliffe's office. I'm wondering, I see some younger faces in the room. I see a mix of generations, which is amazing, but you know, some younger faces in the room too. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, you know, working at, you know, big versus small firms, and what kind of advice you would offer to, you know, younger architects or recent graduates who are kind of trying to figure out what direction to go in.
I would say for me, it was really critical to experience the various sizes of firms. When I started at Shim Sutcliffe, I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. But once I figured it out, I understood that I was at a small firm. It was very boutique. It was very kind of custom. And I really liked it. And so I thought, I'll never work at a big firm. And so my next experience was, you know, at Eisen, because I really wanted to stay in the world of small firms. And when I was interviewing and looking for other jobs, I also stayed within small firms. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you just like meet, you know, go for an interview at KPMB, you never know. And I was like, I don't know, it's so big. And but once I was here, the interview completely changed my mind, and my experience has been completely different. And I'm grateful to have had that range of experience. For me, it was eye-opening to see how a very curated firm operates, very boutique, and how a larger firm who's doing amazing work just at a different scale works. So I would say, don't feel like you have to be in one type of place. Move around as much as you need to. Still make sure you get the right experience, but keep the momentum going, and keep yourself moving to places where you feel like you should be or need to be. Thanks.
Okay. Sam, I'm sorry to like make you eat another frog. I know it's your
Two frogs.
I know. I get the sense that maybe you're like introverted by like nature. So I'm wondering, you know, and so are, you know, 50% or more of the people in the world in architecture, and probably in this room. So I'm wondering, you know, how, if you can provide some advice on how you kind of tackle that, you know, having to operate in a architecture culture that has like many extroverted kind of demands, like, you know, asserting yourself on a construction site and getting what you want built in terms of like the detailing or the way that you envisage things, speaking up in meetings. How do you navigate that as an introvert, or what advice would you give to other introverts that are facing some of those challenges? Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that question. I actually thought about talking about that, but I only had 10 minutes. So I was like, maybe it'll be a question. So thank you. I think if you ask a lot of my coworkers here if I'm introverted or extroverted, they would probably say extroverted, but they might be wrong. I think I am actually introverted in the sense that I recharge reading a book in my room, you know, in solitude. Like I truly do, but I'm very loud. And so that helps. It probably comes from having a big family. Mitch can hear me just fine back there. It comes from having a big family, but I do care about people. I think that's where it stems from. You know, you know, on the construction site, especially as a student in Princeton, it was tremendously daunting and overwhelming. And the project was in New Jersey, and you know, there were probably 3 females on site when I was there. That this was 2014 to 2016. So
They loved you on stage.
yeah, because I was loud. But I think it really, you know, it's a building confidence. I didn't have it right away on site. You know, I was there doing punch lists. I was kind of quiet in the corner, but I observed and I listened and I learned. And for everyone else who's introverted, you know, just keep doing what you're good at and you'll find your path and you'll find your way. And you might not have to be the loudest person in the room, but if you're doing what you care about and you're doing it to the best of your ability, I don't think you have to be the loudest person. Strong isn't loud. So I think you can still be a very strong female in the workforce and not be shouting at a bunch of people at a podium. So I truly am an introvert, and it's just through people that I kind of found my voice. And, you know, there's so many wonderful mentors in this office that are both female and male. You know, you just kind of learn and you grow. So I, again, don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely. That was
Thank you.
really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and I have one last question for Sahana, and then I'm going to open the room, and also I'll take some questions from the room and then turn to the Zoom room for questions. This is a little bit of the, you know, the kind of the flip side of eating your frog, I guess. I feel like, you know, like the amount of enthusiasm that came through. I'm also somebody who says yes a lot and has trouble saying no. So I can also, I kind of was wondering if you could talk to, you know, this other side of like, you know, running towards the things that you fear, but also like this, you know, what you seem to do of like running towards the things that you love and really diving into that. And, you know, how do you know, like, you know, how to balance out, I guess, that, you know, leaning in and leaning back somehow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I think generally I've always just been saying yes to a lot of the things that come my way because I really like helping people. I think a lot of us feel that way. And so whether it's a friend that needs, you know, my assistance in some way of in a particular, you know, skill that I have, I usually always say yes. And so that's a practice that I'm working on, but it always comes down to the fact that I just believe in helping people and watching them succeed. And I think that's something that we just foster here at the firm is that this just like mentorship that feels like so natural and so easy because we're not trying to step over each other in any way. It's something that's just been happening from the beginning and from Shirley and Marianne all the way, you know, down to our new partners. So yeah, no, I don't know how I balance. I don't think that I've struck that yet. I know my friends would say that I definitely haven't struck that balance. I have way too many calendars going. I need to get it into one calendar. But it really is just because I'm super passionate about all of the things that come my way. And sometimes saying yes leads to these incredible opportunities. So that's where it becomes difficult to say no to things. But I think, you know, protecting your peace and understanding that you can't spread yourself too thin and saying yes to everything means that, you know, you're going to neglect something over the other. That's where I'm trying to learn that it is okay to let some things go sometimes because I want to be able to give my full self to the things that I do say yes to. I hope that answers. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So questions from the room. We have any questions from the room? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much. That was such an amazing presentation. I'm an undergraduate student, so it's so inspiring to hear like so many of these stories. I'm wondering how kind of your jobs have evolved through like these different phases in your careers, because all of you are at different points. And I'm wondering, like, do your tasks change? Do your roles at work change? I know your titles change, but what does that mean in terms of the day-to-day work life?
One of the really great things about being here is that it doesn't matter where you are on your journey. This company will kind of put you in any phase of a project. You know, I was a student on a construction site. I was at the earliest of my journey at the end of a project, and that's really special. So I'm very fortunate to have had that experience. I don't think you have to be, you know, a senior associate to be able to be on the construction site. And I would encourage you and everyone who's, you know, younger going into the workplace to find an employer that wants to invest in you as much as you want to invest in them. And it shouldn't be that just because you're a student, you're just going to be, you know, pigeonholed to competitions. I think you need to advocate for yourself and you know, whatever you would like to learn and you would like to work on. I think it's important to voice that. Yeah, I don't know.
I would just add that your title doesn't change before you've got the tasks. Usually your title changes once you're already acting like that person. And so you become an architect once you've done all the things an architect does. And then you become, you know, you become more senior because you've been doing more senior things. You become a leader because you've been doing leadership things, therefore the title's given to you. So it's not like you've been here for 5 years, now you're a leader and now you have to start acting like one. It's usually because you've been acting like that role that you would get the title.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if you don't have the experiences that you kind of want to get to, you just ask. That's why I think it's important to ask and kind of strategize, like, where do I want to be and what do I want to do? What do I have to learn to get there, right? And just ask. And usually, I don't know, I ask for the thing that I like.
Or sometimes it's just someone putting you up for the task, you know?
Right. Sometimes it's really hard and you're like, you have to eat a frog. It's not something else like this.
Yeah. My name is Ahmed, and I deal with newly coming here, internationally trained professionals, architects, engineers. Some are men and some are women. And one of the problems they have is self-confidence. And I would like your perspective on it. I'm a coach. I coach them how to gain confidence. Personally, coming from a very shy environment background, low energy, low confidence and everything. And I somehow conquered them. So now I'm trying to train them in that respect. But I would like to have different perspectives on this issue. Like some of you came from outside the country. What did you do to gain that confidence? The more I know about it, the better I can help.
Yeah. I work really hard. And it's not easy. I think it was, for a long time, I put my head down and I just work and work and work. And sometimes you're like, oh, I really wanted, like, you kind of, it took a while to find out what I really wanted to do. But, you know, you have role models. I have Shirley. I have Marianne, like, and you kind of, okay, what do I have to do? Like, help me, and ask for help. But it's not easy because, you know, I didn't speak the language when I went to school. School was super hard. So it takes time. I don't think it can be rushed, but you know, you have to follow your dream and try to do the things that are gonna get you there, and work really hard. I don't know. And it's still really hard. Like, I still have to do, like, and there's more things I want to do like this, right? So, but kind of work on the things that you really love and learn options. like always, I don't know, I had always to present lots of options because I wanted to do a lot, so I did a lot. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, I went through a similar journey myself.
Yeah.
I came as an internationally trained architect here, so went through all the stages of, the internship and the exams and NCARB and all the stuff. I went through hard work.
Yeah, and then don't forget where you came from, because I think that brings now, especially now in this day and age, like everyone's voice matter and your story matters, and we're supposed to build spaces for everyone, right? So everyone's voice is important.
I would add to that for me, a lack of confidence is a fear of not being good or not being good enough. And the way to overcome that is to actually prove to yourself that you are. So you just have to gain experience. If you're afraid to speak a different language, you keep practicing until you can speak it, and then you get good at it, and then you get your confidence. And it's not until you start doing that you start gaining confidence. You can think about it for as long as you want, and you can talk about it for as long as you want. Until you start doing and gaining experience, it'll be really hard to gain confidence. And so for people who are just starting out, they are going to have that fear, and they just need to experience things and try things, maybe fail, maybe succeed, but that's probably how they'll gain their confidence.
Okay, I see one more question there. I'm going to read one question from the Zoom room, and then we'll take your question as the last one so that we have some time for the. Okay, let's take yours first then, and then I'll ask our Zoom room to be patient for the last question.
Wonderful question to ask, and a lot of immigrants, females, especially in this industry, struggle with this. I think being in a space that appreciates and acknowledges your talent, your special voice, space for that voice is so critical. And it's up to the people that you're training to find a place that allows that kind of encouragement to happen. And I've been working in Toronto for about 12, 15 years. I've been in many offices, and each office has a different culture. And if there's a place where you can find yourself settling and having a voice and having encouragement and having mentorship, that's the place that you have to gravitate towards. And I'm 3 weeks into this office, and I'm learning a lot about the culture here. And everything that you've heard today is absolutely it's invigorating to me, because there's a lot of that mentorship and acknowledgement of talent. So find the place where you fit best that allows for your voice to be heard. And it's search.
Okay. And then I'll do the one last question from the Zoom room. So there's a few there. I think we covered some of the questions that are here, but Nella asks, I realize from the talk that communication and mentorship are really critical to young architects. What kind of attitude or mindset do you suggest to have to improve those connections from within yourselves and with others in the company where you're working? So, so what kind of tips do you have for communication and finding mentorship?
Yeah, so I think for me, because I'm the youngest out of all of us, I've experienced a lot of the spectrum of mentorship, of now being a mentor myself, but just in the infancy of that, and having had a lot of mentors. It was just seeking and asking questions, like being really curious. And yeah, just taking, because I was saying yes a lot, I was just wanting to talk to as many people as possible, and that would lead me to another person who would, tell me about another person to meet, and, leveraging my family and friends, because not all of them were necessarily in architecture, but they knew people that were kind of architecture adjacent or design adjacent. And I explored my other passions like graphic design, and found even more connections to architecture than I thought I would, even though I wasn't kind of going on that direct path right away straight into architecture. So I'd say being curious is one of the most important things, because it really leads you to being able to meet with folks that just want to hear about your story, and you can hear about their story. And it opens that line of communication that fosters really good mentorship.
Yeah, I would have added to exactly that, to keep asking questions. I mean, no one comes out of school into the profession knowing everything. You're going to find natural mentors wherever you end up, just by virtue of asking questions. So not to shy away from asking the questions. I now, in my journey, finding myself in roles of being the mentor to younger people coming into the office. And from that perspective, if you do find yourself in that position, to just, not everybody will have the confidence to ask the questions and to speak up. And so there's a mindfulness there to check in with your team and to check in with those that may not be as vocal, just to help everybody grow. At the end of the day, architecture is really a team effort and a collaborative effort, and you want to make sure that everybody on your team is inspired and engaged. So yeah.
All right, so I'll close the talk there and thank our panelists, and Masa is going to come up to Kiana is going to come up and just have a few logistical notes before we go back to networking. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So on behalf of BEAT, we would like to thank you all for joining us tonight and participating in the event. A special thank you to our wonderful, amazing speakers for giving the talk, and to KPMB for hosting us. Please remember to sign up for our mailing list on the BEAT website to receive notifications on all of our upcoming events. And if you would like to volunteer with us, you can also check out the volunteer section on our website, or come talk to one of our volunteers and we'll help you join our team. Thank you very much. Thank you.